Let's just jump right in. We've all seen those flashy headlines, right? The ones claiming that doing X absolutely leads to Y. But how do scientists actually know that for sure? How do they move past, just making an educated guess to actually proving cause and effect? Well, that's exactly what we're tackling in today's Explainer. We're going to look under the hood at the actual engine driving those claims, experimental research design.
So, think about a real-world scenario for a second. Let's say we've got this brand new teaching method, and we want to know if it actually improves students' grades. We obviously can't just guess, and we definitely can't rely on a hunch. We have to ask the critical question. How do we scientifically prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that one specific thing causes a definitive change in another?
To answer that, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by defining what experimental research design actually is. Then break down the variables and groups involved. After that, we'll look at the different types of designs, walk through the 7 research steps, and finally weigh the pros and cons of the whole shebang.
All right, Section 1, defining experimental research design. What exactly is this methodology at its core? Basically, it is a strictly quantitative method. It's all about the numbers, the hard data. The whole point here is to test a hypothesis and definitively measure the impact of an intervention, but doing so under strictly controlled conditions. So when a researcher wants to know if one specific variable influences another, like, say, if a new drug cures a disease, or if a bold new marketing strategy actually drives sales, they use this setup. They manipulate just one factor and observe the outcome, essentially ruling out any other possible explanation. It's like isolating a single piece of a giant puzzle to see exactly how it fits.
Moving on to Section 2, the variables and groups, because let's be honest, you simply can't have an experiment without these key moving parts.
The easiest way to think of the independent variable is as the cause. This is the intervention that the researcher is intentionally changing or manipulating. Going back to our earlier example, this would be that new teaching method. And that manipulation leads directly to the dependent variable, which is the effect. This is the outcome you're actually measuring. In our case, the student's academic performance. So the entire goal here is just to change the teaching method and see if student performance improves as a direct measurable result. Make sense?
But wait a second. How do we know the new teaching method caused those better grades, and not just, the fact that the students got a really good night's sleep? Well, that's exactly where groups come in. To ensure accurate results and block out all those pesky outside factors, researchers split their participants into 2 distinct camps. You've got the experimental group, which gets the actual treatment, the new teaching method, and then you have the control group, which doesn't. They just get the standard, traditional method. By comparing these 2 side by side, researchers can isolate the exact impact of that independent variable.
Okay, Section 3, types of experimental designs. Let's look at how this builds into different frameworks depending on how much control a researcher actually has out there in the real world.
Because as you probably guessed, not all experiments are created equal. First up, we have the true experimental design. This is the absolute gold standard. It uses random assignment alongside control groups, meaning students are randomly assigned to those 2 different teaching methods, which pretty much eliminates bias entirely. But sometimes pure randomness just isn't practically possible, and that gives us quasi-experimental design. This one uses pre-existing groups, like comparing 2 classrooms that are already set up and running. Finally, we have pre-experimental design. This is the simplest format with the most limited control. Usually, it's just looking at a single group of people right before and right after an intervention.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 7 research steps. Let's actually walk through this process from scratch. Think of Phase 1 as setting the stage. During this setup phase, you first identify the problem, basically determining exactly what effect you want to study. Then you formulate a hypothesis. For instance, you might make a clear prediction that students taught using interactive multimedia instruction are going to perform way better than those taught traditionally. Next, you select your participants, and critically, this is huge, you divide those groups, assigning them to your experimental and control brackets. Honestly, without this rigorous setup, the data you collect later isn't going to mean much of anything.
Once everything is meticulously set up, we enter Phase 2, execution. This is where the magic happens. You conduct the experiment by actually applying that treatment. Then, since this is a quantitative design, you collect the hard data and analyze it using statistical tools. And yeah, I'm sorry to say, math is definitely required here. You're using those tools to compare the results between your groups.
Finally, step 7 is to draw concrete conclusions. Did the treatment actually cause significant, measurable changes? The statistics will give you a definitive yes or no.
All right, final section, advantages and disadvantages. Let's evaluate this design to see where it really shines and where it kind of falls short. The immense power of this methodology is honestly undeniable. The absolute biggest advantage is its ability to definitively determine cause and effect. Because it allows for such tight, rigorous control of outside variables, it produces highly reliable and deeply objective results. Whether you need to test a groundbreaking new medical treatment, a psychological intervention, or our trusty teaching method example, this design cuts straight through the noise. It tells you exactly what is working and why.
However, as you might expect, these incredible benefits do come with a significant cost. Setting up true randomized control groups can be incredibly time-consuming and often requires some highly complex procedures. Plus, there's a serious human element to consider here. Some experiments simply aren't practical, or ethical for that matter, to conduct on real people. And finally, creating a highly controlled, purely artificial laboratory setting, that might actually cause your participants to behave unnaturally, which, ironically enough, can totally skew the very data you worked so hard to protect in the first place.
But ultimately, when you take a step back from all the complex variables, the heavy statistical analyses, and the strict methodology, it really just boils down to one simple idea. If you ever forget all the academic jargon, just remember this easy rule of thumb. Experimental research design is simply testing whether one thing causes another. If you want to know about impact, influence, or effect, this is absolutely your tool. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If you were to change one small, independent variable in your own daily routine starting tomorrow, how exactly would you measure its effect?